Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Prashant and Jeevna.
Hi, Vinay, good morning.
Yeah, able to see my screen? Sure, so we'll start now. Any questions from the previous sessions? So if there are no questions, it means that you're not finding time to try out the things that we have done in the class. Otherwise, you should definitely have some questions. So we'll go to the notebook now, and today we are going to create some of the most important things that we learn in the programming, the creation of the functions and the classes. The functions and classes, so the screen is not visible or it's not clear to you. The PPT also not visible, or that was the problem with the notebook. Okay. I think I is it clear now? Okay. Sure. So why we also need to create these functions, because whatever code we write, at some point of time, we would like to use the same piece of code in another context, or we would like to give the access to this code to someone else to use. And therefore, it should be something like that we convert a piece of the code or a part of the code into some sort of a black box where the user, or later on we ourselves, if we are going to use it, does not really need to know how that piece of code is working. Just as suppose we have an electric equipment in the house, we don't really need to know what is the internal mechanism of a fridge or a TV. As a user, we would just like to plug in and get started. We don't really need to know the internals of a machine. What is required is that the input is, there would be a plug that I need to put somewhere, switch on, and it starts working. The functions and classes actually give that kind of flexibility in the context of software. So for the user, it becomes a black box. So he did not know how it works. And there are many benefits of that. So for example, if I have written a piece of code which I want you to use, and both of us could be part of the same team, or that also is not really required. We could make the function available to others as well. What we just need to know is that how to interface with the method or a function or a class. And to be able to know that how to interface, we just need to know that what is the parameters that we need to send. How do we need to call or invoke the function? And we also need to know that in what form or what does it return back to us. So that part is called the abstraction part, abstraction in the context of the function. So abstraction makes it very simple for any individual to start using a piece of code without really knowing how that code has been structured or what is inside that. And we will see the benefit of that. The second thing is, or the second concept which we use for writing a good code and for designing how the functions and classes should be designed, is called decomposition. And that means that if you're writing a solution to any of the problems, it will involve lot many functions. I mean, lot many operations we perform. So for example, you prepare the data, then you do first operation, then you do the second operation. All these functions, we should try to break the code into logically cohesive groups of operation and create one function out of one logically cohesive group of operations. And we will see the examples of that today. But for writing a good code, for designing a function or a class well, we should ensure that the the code that we are writing, one function is handling one type of operation. And in the process, we need to see that if I am writing 2 or 3 or 4 more functions, then all these functions are able to work with each other. So we should be able to break them into smaller parts, and then we should make them work together. Now, all the examples that we have taken so far has been very small examples, because the idea was to learn how Python actually works as a language, or how do we communicate with the machines using Python as a language. But as we start solving the problem, you will see that you need to write maybe a longer uh, piece of code, and managing the code becomes very difficult if we are not taking care that small parts which are performing one set of function are kept separate. So to make the code manageable also, we need to ensure that especially in the longer projects, or especially in a more complex projects, we need to make the code manageable, and code becomes manageable if we divide them into small functions. And each function, therefore, it becomes a self-contained module, and it becomes reusable. What happened? Okay. Then let's see what the functions themselves are. So the function would be composed of, the function will have a name, the function will have a list of parameters, and some of the functions need not really require any parameters. Some of these variations we will experiment with. So it has a name. So whenever we define a function, we need to give it a name. Then we need to give the list of parameters that the function will accept. Then there would be a body of the function which actually contains the main part of the code, and it shows that what all operations are being done inside the function, and in the end the function will return some value. So return statement is actually optional, because you can have a function which does not return any value to you. It performs certain operations and then the function ends. It does not really return anything. But whenever you give a return, the system will treat that as a last statement of the function, and after that nothing will be executed. The return would be the last statement. It will return whatever value you want to return, and when we say return, whenever I call the function, it will run the all the commands which is inside the function, return some value or some result. We will see that. And since nothing gets executed after the return, you can use the return statement only once. So let's go back to our Colab notebook, and all of you who have the laptops with you, I would urge you to open your laptop parallelly and open the notebook, Colab notebook there, and try to perform a few things as I do here, and that becomes simpler. So let's first do all the imports. So we are importing pandas, we are importing NumPy, we are importing sys. Right? All of these I would not be using today, but as you will see that import is anyway the very first operation or that we do, because that makes us all these libraries available to us. So it is initializing still. If you see here, as it is trying to connect to the server, it will show we are connecting, initializing, and then we will have the access to the Colab. So after the imports, we will create a small function. So whenever we start writing a function, it it has to start with def. So as Python sees the first word is def, now it knows that this is a function. Now, one of the things is that the functions will not run on its own. It has to be called. So whatever is the body of the function, whatever we want to do with the function, it will not perform on its own. So as I run this cell in which I have defined a function, then the function will not run. It has only initialized that this function becomes available to the notebook because I have run that cell. But as you have seen that there is no result coming from here, we will have to consciously invoke it, and invocation is done with the name of the function. So you see here, def means that we are now starting defining a function, or we are starting creating a function. Then we give a name to it. So this one is an indicator that this is a function. Then this is the name of the function. And after that, we give a parenthesis and we define what are the different parameters which this function takes. So here we have just defined n, and you could give any name here. That does not really matter. Then this n becomes a parameter which the function will get. So when we invoke the function would be expecting n or some number to, n does not really mean number or some variable. It can be, the n can be a string, and n can be a list. That at this point of time, we don't need to worry about. What we need to worry about is that when we use the n, then the system has to do the right kind of operation. So if I have a list, then on that list, I can't really do a square operation. For doing this square operation, I need to have a number. And we will start with a very small and simple function. We are just saying return the square of n. Okay. And then let's first just call the function. I'll comment out the print part and just say get a square. And since the function is it is expecting some variable, we can now give the value of that variable. So if I say get square 8, this is how I invoke the function, or this is how we will call the function. So give the name of the function, then within the parenthesis, we give all the variables that is expected by the function. Okay. So if I run this, then you see that it is now giving me, it is returning to me 64 here. So what is happening is that there is a function. Once we call the function, it will go and look for that. Now this 8 is the it is called the actual variable that we are passing to the function, and this n is called the formal variable. So this is the actual variable and this is the formal variable. So now if you see, as we call, this 8 will be assigned to n. So once we call the function, the first thing it will do, that it will assign the value of 8 to n, and then it will perform whatever operation we want to perform. So it will return me the 8 square, and that is 64 here. Now I can go on changing the value and it will go on returning to me. So if you see, I'm not making any change to the code. Now I can use the square function from anywhere in the notebook and even outside the notebook, but outside the notebook I'll demonstrate to you later. Let's right now focus that within the notebook, how do we call a function? Okay, so this function can be called by providing required variable by giving the name, and it returns the value. Now as it returns the value, I can store it into another variable. So for example, if I say here n is equal to get a square 12, and then I'll print n. So here I am passing 12. Now you see that another important thing to understand is that when I pass 12 here, the value of n becomes 12 here, and then it is returning to me 144, which will be the square value. And then the value of this part of the code has now become 144 because get square 12 is 144, and therefore when I print n, it will give me 144. Now I am deliberately using the same n here and same n here because this n, which is a part of the function, every variable has a scope. When we say a scope, it means that the value of n inside the function that will remain valid only. So the value of this n will remain valid only inside the function. The moment I say return, the value of this n is gone. So let me also do it here. N is equal to 14. I'll just put here 14. And then we are calling the square of 12. So this n, which is a variable inside the function, now the value of that becomes 12. But I have defined the value of n as 14 earlier. So this 14 will not be overwritten by 12 because the n here becomes 12. If I give here, it should give me 14. This is also important to understand because whatever variable we use inside the function, the validity of that variable will remain, so that variable will remain valid only inside that function. Outside that, if the same variable has been used, it will retain its value. So we are giving the value of n as 14, and then we are calling get square with 12. So the value of this n, which is a function inside the square, inside the get square function, becomes 12. So now there is a conflict that n is having two values. I have defined as 14, and the value of n inside the function becomes 12. But as soon as I come out of the function, the value of this n, which is a variable inside the function, that would get released, and then only this will retain. Now if also I give a print command here, print n, then it will here, or say I'll put here, this is the value inside the function. Then it will give me 12, but as soon as it comes out of the function, this variable would be released. And what we have in memory now is only n is equal to 14. But as long as it is inside the function, it will carry a value of 12. Let's see that. So I'm defining n as 14, and let's print the value of get square. When should print actually. So inside this square function, we are asking it to print. So when we call the function, it should print. Now, you see, so we defined the value of n as 14. Then we said get square 12. So 12 I am passing into the function. So this n will now carry a value of whatever the parameter value we are passing. So this n will become 12. So inside the function, the value of this n is, that's what we are printing. This is the value inside. first it is saying that this is the value inside function and that value is 12. But when it comes out of it, and again I am asking it to print n here, just for the sake of clarity, I'll put. Now the moment it comes out of the function, it retains the value that we are defined here. So these are called the global variables and these will be called the local variables. So n here is local to the function and therefore it will carry the value of 12 as long as we are using the n inside the function. But the moment it comes out of the function, the n will become will carry the value of the global variable which we have defined as 14. So that is also important to understand, and that also gives you the freedom to use the same variable. No, you don't have to really go and find out a new variable inside the function, and that would not be possible anyway because the very purpose of the function is that it should be callable from anywhere. So if I am using a function or a class which is defined by you, then I won't be knowing that what are the variables that you are using, and therefore the functions have to use the variable only. The value of those will be valid only inside the function, and the moment the function operation is completed, those values would be released. Okay. Now another thing is that we can call a function with a value, or so I'll comment this out, or I will just remove this. So my function is a very small function, maybe the simplest function that you could write. Now we can call a function with a variable, or we can call the function inside a function. So let's see the results of this. Let me remove this print n here. Okay. Now another thing that you are seeing here, that although I have removed the print command inside the function, it is still printing it here. You are not seeing that print command here inside the function, but it is still saying that this is the value inside the function. Why did that happen? Any idea? Why is that happening? I have removed that, but still it is going on executing the same thing. It is happening because after making that change, I have not run this cell. So yeah, so I have not run this cell, and in these cases, when you do it and suppose you made the changes to the earlier cells, as you could just go and say runtime and then say run before. So it will run all the cells before that. Now if we run, then we are seeing the result as 4 and 16. So first time I am passing a value of 2. Second time and I am passing this as a parameter. So get square 2 is, so when I call get square 2, the value becomes 4 as we are seeing here, and then it will call the function again with the value that we obtain here. So since it returns a value of 4, in the second instance then we call a get square. Now we are calling the get square with a value of 4, and that's why the result is coming as 16. So you can call a function inside the function also. Okay. Now we can also give a default value to the function. So here we could say that n is equal to 5. Now this is a default value. So if I don't pass any value to the function, so if I don't pass any value to the function, it will take a default value. You'll see here. So if we don't pass any value to the function, that is if we don't pass any parameter, it will take the default parameter. So I have defined it as n is equal to 5. But the moment I pass a value, it will take that value. So n will not take 5, n will take the value that we are passing. So if we are passing the value of a parameter, and if no default value is initialized, then it will take the value that we are passing, or it will take the actual value of the parameter that we are passing. So in the first case, since we are not passing, it will take the default value. In the second case, since we are passing 2, it will first take the value of the get square, that becomes 4. Then it will again call the get square function with 4, and that number becomes 16. Now, if I have not defined any default value, and then the system is expecting n, and I don't provide any value, then let's see what happens. So I run this again. That gives me an error and says that get square function missing one required position argument n. It means that it was expecting some value for the n which has not been passed. In that case, it will give you an error. So to avoid this kind of error, and if you could give a default value, or if in some cases default value, it needs to operate with the default value, then you could give a default value. And if it has a default value, then I don't need to necessarily pass the value of that specific parameter. We could just call it without defining that parameter. Now, the parameter that we are defining need not be only one. It can be a series of parameters. So for example, if I say here n and m is equal to 5, I will say return n square. Let's call this 3. Now we will see here. So the first one we are calling with only 3, and there are 2 variables that this is expecting, n and m. M I have given a default value, and I'm calling this with 3. So 3 will get attached to n. M has a default value, and therefore it is returning me the square of 3 here and the square of 5 here, 25. Now the second one is not working as we saw earlier. It is giving me an error because the value that it is returning, it is actually in the form of a this is called a tuple. It means that you have a list of values, but I mean you have more than one values, but it is not a list. It is a if these are shown in the parentheses, these are called the tuples. So what we need to call here is with the individual number and not with the tuple. So we'll come to that part of the complexity later on, but let's just focus right now on this one. So it is returning me 9 and 25. So what we are seeing here is that we can define the function, we can give a name. After that, there could be a series of variables which we can pass to the function, and different types of operations can be done inside the function. Let's expand this here, and then we will say that m is equal to m plus n, and here, yeah, so we'll just return m. So if we define the function this way, let's see what the output is. So m becomes m plus n, so 5 plus 3. Now, if I call this with 2 variables, what will happen now? 3 will get attached to n, and 10 will get attached to m, and therefore here we should get m becomes 13 and n becomes 9. Okay, So that's how the structure of a very simple function would be, that we give a name, we start with def, we give a name, then we define within the parenthesis the list of the parameters that it expects, then we give a colon. This is important. If you don't give a colon, then it will not know that where the definition of the function ends and from where the body of the function starts. So here we give, and then whatever operation you want to do, that will be defined in the body, and then we say return. Okay. So that's how we have defined during the course. Now we have defined the first function. Let's now create a bit more complex function. So this was the simplest of the functions that we did. So this becomes a very simple function. Now if I run this, it should show me an error. Why? Because it was expecting only one variable. I am passing 2. So if I run with this, because the return, this m is not recognized. And then calling a function within the function. So that's how we create a function. Now, yesterday we will try creating another function. Yesterday we had written the code for getting the multiplication table for a given number. Now we will convert that into a function so that I can get the table of any given number, any number that we want. So we had defined an empty table. Then we say for I in the range 1 to 10, so it will do the multiplication from 1 until 10, since we are defining 11 here. And then we are appending to the table I and the number, multiplication of I and the number. So this number, I will be passing now the number. I will be defining what number I want the table for, and then it will append that, and it is returning the table. So why I am taking this example, that in the earlier one it was returning a number, now it will return a list. So table is a list. So return value can be any type of data. It can be a number, it can be a dictionary, it can be a list, it can be another object. So now we will run this cell, and now in the next one we are saying table A is equal to get multiplication table of 5. So I will get the table of 5, and then I am assigning that to table A. I am getting a table of 12, and I am assigning that to table to a variable by name table B, and then I am saying print table A, give a line break, and then print table B. So I am able to get the entire table, because what it is returning is a list. We are defining table as a empty list. And why list? Because it is starting with a bracket. So we are able to get a list. So the return value can be any type of data. Now we'll do an exercise together. You need to guide me how to convert the Fibonacci code that we had done yesterday into a function. So what do we do? How do we start? Let me create a new. How do we start? This was the code, isn't it? What we had written for getting the Fibonacci number. So here, this code was giving us the Fibonacci numbers, all the Fibonacci numbers until 500. This was the code. Now I want to convert this code into a function so that I don't have to, suppose if I want all the numbers below 1000, I don't have to come and change the code. Because here, if I want to change this to 1000, I will have to change this to 1000, then I'll come and change this to 1000. Only then it will give me the value, and if I run this, now it is giving me all the Fibonacci numbers, which is less than 1000. But you see, the danger here is that I am now going and changing the code, which is working well. So every time that you change the code, you run the risk of making some mistake here, because I need to, if you see here, I need to change the value of B twice, and if I either change only at one place, or I make a mistake of putting one more zero here, I will not get the required result. And therefore, once a piece of code is working, we should encapsulate that inside a function so that we don't have to go on changing the code again and again, even if I want to run the same code with different values or different parameters. That's the thing that we want to do now. This is the code that I had written and I had tested. Now, having tested that this part of the code is working well, now we would like to encapsulate that inside a function so that I don't have to come and touch that code again and again. So what we'll do, if this is the code, and if I want to convert this into Fibonacci into a function, what do? I'll start with def. So you see here, we'll start with def. We'll give it a name. So the first line is the definition of the function. So the definition of the function is that I have to give a name and I have to give the parameters. So now I want to say that not just less than this, I want to call this Fibonacci function to give me all the Fibonacci numbers within a given range, and therefore I am initializing it with a start and end. So there will be two different variables, two different parameters to this function, start and the end. And I'm initializing it, and I'm giving a default value of 0 to the start and 100 to the end. Then we just paste this piece of code here. So what we'll do is that let's forget about whatever is written here. Now this piece of code we'll just copy here inside the function. Now notice that we have the body of the function will have an intent. So if you, after defining that this is a function, if you again start from here, it will show an error. So it has to be indented. Now in this piece of code, I was initializing these variables. So the same thing is here. Now, since I want to give a start and the end condition, I'll have to give that while so A and B, rather than initializing, so A and B, we initialize to 0 and 1. Now we see that while B is less than this 500, I will replace that with end. Okay, because either I'll get the default value or this value will be passed on to me. So I will run this until B is less than, or if you want to give less than equal to end. Then again, since I am running a while loop, this part has to be indented. Then I say that A and B, I am assigning so we have seen the multiple assignments earlier also, And in the assignment, we know that the part of the code which is after the equal to sign will be executed first. And whatever is the result, that would be assigned to the variables that we are defining before whatever is before the equal to sign. So what will happen is that first it will come and do this part of the operation. So we are just taking B, which is 1. So there is some slight change in the code that we have seen yesterday. And now I want to show you the multiple assignments and how we can use the power of those multiple assignments. So here, once it comes inside this while loop, it will take B first. What is the value of B here? The value of B here is 1. Now it will do this operation, A plus B, and that value will become 1. Now it will assign these values to A and B respectively. So A takes the value of B and B takes the value of A plus B. This is also important to understand. So now after this line is executed, earlier A was carrying a value of 0 and B was carrying a value of 1. After the assignment, A will take the value of B and B will take the value of A plus B. So both of these become 1 and 1. Okay. And then if we say that if B is, since now we want to see the values only within the start and end range, now I say that if B is greater than or equal to start and B is less than equal to end. So rather than giving just 500, I am replacing these with the variables that we will get. So start will have some value, end will have some value, and those are the values that we'll use here. And then we are saying print B. Okay. So after having defined, I'll explain what is that P5. Just let me get the numbers here. It is not printing here. Just let me see why it is not printing here. So in the earlier code, while B is less than or equal to end, AB is going to be A plus B, same thing that I was doing. Let's see. Okay. So here you see that I have given, if I don't give any parameter, what should happen? It should take the default values of start and end, and it will show me only the value which is between 0 and 100. If I give, say here 50, and if I don't define the second one, it should give me between 50 and 100. So it showed me the Fibonacci values which are only between 50 and 100. If I give that as 50 and 400, so That's how we are using the power of the function. Now, one question is that this P5. So if you recall our discussion from the string operation, uh, let's store this to some value. Say that these are the Fibonacci. And then if we say here for I in fibs, just want to print the number. So this is called the F string. It means that you're defining a string. Inside that string, certain operations can be done or certain variables can be used. So if you define the string with an F, then it allows you to put this place for variable or the placeholder for variables inside that string itself. So I'll put here the I can say here step, and then I create a placeholder by the curly braces, and then I say print I here. So it will take the value of I in each iteration, and then okay. So this will take the value, the first value from the list fibs, and then I was saying now I can format this value. So one of the ways to format it is to say that show me in 5 places. So if say 55 will have only 2 digits, 233 has 3 digits. So if I want to align them, I can define that how many spaces it should take to print it. So all the numbers would get right aligned automatically. All the strings will get left aligned. So let's see how it does. You see here. So it is taking 5 spaces to print the value of I. Now, all the numbers will get automatically right aligned, but if I want to left align this, I just need to give this. So this part, the colon and whatever follows here, is the type of format which I need to assign onto this variable or the value. So if I give this one, then you see it becomes left aligned. If I want to print this in decimals, I can give here 0.2f. Sorry, it is come outside. You see, so the value remains the same, only the format in which it is getting printed, that gets changed. So that's what the F string is a very powerful thing, especially when you want to print something in a given format. Then it's the easiest thing to use is the F string. So now we have seen that how we can write a small piece of code which is using the conditions like if, which is using a loop like a for or a while, and then how we can embed this operation inside a function, and then we can call the function. So I don't need to now make any change in this piece of code. If I want to see the Fibonacci numbers between 50 or 100 or 50 or 200 or 0 or 5000, now I don't need to go and make any change inside that. So the two benefits that you receive, that I don't make a, once this piece of code is tested, I put that inside the black box so that I don't make a mistake of changing a few things which may go wrong. And then I can keep calling that function with different parameters and I get the results. So I hope because as we go forward and start handling more complex problems, the definition of the function and the classes will become very handy. We'll start with the functions right now, then we'll go to the classes. Okay. Now we go back to our backpack problem. And earlier we had seen that the people who joined a bit late, just to explain to you the backpack problem. The backpack problem was that a thief has entered into a house. He is carrying a backpack and he can carry only 20 kgs in his backpack. There are several items available in the house. There is a gold, there are some silver utensils, there is a bronze statue, there are clothes, and there are so many, other things, the eatables, the grains, and so on. So the problem that he is trying to address is that how do I take out the maximum value of things out of the house? So all those items that we talked about, we just gave a simple name of A, B, C, D, E, and we say that this is the weight of the individual items in kilograms, 1 kg, half kg, 5 kg, 8 kg, and so on. So A has a weight of 1 kg, B has a weight of half kg, and so on and so forth. The value of each item is given here. So the value of A, one item of A is 5,000. The value of one item of B is 1 lakh, and so on. And how many of these are available in the house? So these many things are there. Now, if this is the situation, then which are the ones which I should choose so that I am carrying out the highest amount of value? So now we will put the same thing inside a function so that we are clear that how these things operate. And not for that purpose, but also we had said that now the same kind of problem will be there in many other circumstances. For example, if I am going to a hotel and I say that I want to take a maximum of 1,000 calories because doctor has advised me to go on a diet. So how do I get those 1,000 calories at a minimum cost? So if you see, we talked about the concept of the computational thinking, and the computational thinking was that can we abstract out the common things or abstract out the idea of the problem into a shape which my machine will understand. So first thing that we did is that we are putting the details of the problem into a format which my machine would be able to understand. And of course, the formats could be different formats. We could use a dictionary, we could use a list. But first is that to put the data of the problem into a format which the machine would be able to understand in a very easy fashion. So we are putting all this data that we have into a list, and then we will do the operations with the list. Then we say that now I have this data. The logic would be that first I find out that which item is giving me the highest value for the least amount of weight. And that we can find out only if we divide the value by the weight. So then I will get the value per unit of weight, and whichever is giving me the highest value per unit of weight, that is the first thing which I should pick up. So that was the first part of logic. The second part of logic was that, okay, now that I know which one to pick up, the second part was that how much we can pick up. So there are two aspects to it. One is that I can't pick up more than 20 kg in total. And the second is that I can't pick up items more than what I have. So if I am picking up, say, A, I can't take more than 6 because that's the total number of items available in the house anyway. So the second part of the question was that how many of these do I pick up? And that would be restrained by how much weight I have still available how much space I still have available in the bag, and how many items I have available. So I'll take the minimum of the two. Having done that, I will again compute that how much
space I still have available, and go on repeating this until I cross my limit. So that's what we had done earlier, and that's what we are now putting into a function. And after having put that into the function, we will see that we can use the same function if I want to build a menu out of the different items I have in the hotel. Then I'll have the calories defined, then I have the price defined, and then we say that, okay, you know, just because the soft drink is giving me a higher calorie per unit, it doesn't mean that I only take soft drink and I don't take anything else. So we have the maximum number of items that I can take in one meal. So maybe I can take only two servings of French fries, or maybe only two soft drinks, but only one pizza, and things like that. So these numbers there would be how much of each item available in the hotel I can really put into my menu. So the construct of the problem is very much the same. And therefore, without making any change to the code, I should be able to solve the backpack problem. At the same time, I should be able to solve the menu problem also. Then we'll also see that now different variations of that without changing a code, and we will come to some of these. So first, we are saying that get the selection. It means that first let me know that which items are getting selected. So here I'm using two principles. Now earlier we had written the code in a single uh, cell. Now we are dividing that into two different parts. So just let me see if I can show you what we had done earlier. So everything was written in a single piece of code. I'll take out the previous worksheet that we had worked with.
So here, this was the code we had written, that here we were defining the weight limit as 2000, and then we were writing the piece of code here which was giving me the output. And then, so all these operations, for the sake of demonstration, we were doing and putting that in the single cell. So what we had done, the logic was given here. The same thing I have done, that after having tested that this piece of code works, I brought it here. Now I am breaking this into two parts. First is that I am getting the list of items which I would select. Having done that, then I find out that other operations like finding out what the total value is, finding out what the total count is, and things like that. So first is that I am doing an item selector. That is the name I have given to my function. So we'll call another function inside this function. So we are starting here. What are the inputs I need to give? I need to give the inputs of what are the items I have available. And then I am defining that what is my constraining unit. In the case of the backpack problem, the constraining unit is the weight. Then the value, the numbers which I have, the four things that we saw here. Then
this limit itself, I am passing as another variable. So if you see in this piece of code, we are defining the limit here, and we have to go and change these limits every time. So we will define that as the limit here. Then, since we want to use this problem as both a maximizing function and a minimizing function, so I am just saying here that whether I want to maximize or minimize. So in the backpack problem, I am trying to maximize the value given the constraint of weight. In the menu building problem, I will be trying to minimize the cost given the limit on the calories that I want to take. So for that given calorie, how do I construct a menu so that my cost is minimum? So I'm just making a small change here, that the same problem, I am making it useful, or I am making it available for both minimization and maximization problems. So these are the two new variables I am introducing now. Limit was the one which we were defining outside. These were the four variables anyway we were using earlier. And I am saying that whether I want to use this function for maximization or minimization. And I give a default value to maximize is true. And that would mean that if I don't give the value to this variable, then it will do the maximization, and I can pass another value to this variable. So first thing we were doing is that putting all these variables into a data frame, because we said that the operations become much simpler if you put that into data frame. So we are putting all these list of items that we are receiving into a data frame, and we are doing a transpose of that. And then we are giving the column names, item, constraint, value, and numbers. Why we are doing a transpose? We have seen that earlier, because the list, so all the list will be appended like the rows when we create a data frame. And then we are doing a transpose, so the rows becomes column and columns become rows. So now I get my data frame on which we will do the operation. Then we are just doing a simple tweak and say that if maximize, then I take the compute the value of value per unit as value by constraint unit, and if it is minimization, then I just take an inverse of that. So I put the same value and put that one by this one. Or we could take another approach, that the first we compute the value per unit, and if it is maximized, then sort in descending order, and here we sort on ascending order. So both of these will actually work. Having done that, we do a sorting, and then having sorted that, now I call the function get selection. It means that until now I have got my data prepared in the form with which I will call the selection, and the logic of selection I have put into another variable. Now in designing these codes, there is no hard and fast rule. You could have divided this into maybe 3 or 4 different functions, or anything that looks logical to you, you should club that into a given function. So just because I have done that into 2 functions, that is not really the hard and fast rule, because in different problems, different people will approach that differently. But the idea remains the same, that a logical set of operations should be done in one function. So the way that I have done is that getting the data and doing the basic preparation of data, or the data preparation part, I am doing in one function, and the logic of selection I have put into another function. So the logic of selection is that I am giving it the data and I am passing the limit. So with the data and the limit, and df is the data frame now. So with this data and limit, we had worked out the logic. So I will iterate through all the items. So I'll first iterate through the first item and see that how much of that I want to select. For doing those computation, I need to extract certain values from the data frame that is being done here. And then I do the computation. So I first compute the available limit, and all this we have gone through, so I will not repeat that. So just to repeat that, in this function, I am performing just the selection part, and the data preparation part I am doing in a function called item selector. So both of these I will initialize. And then I call the function. So I call this function. I'm not calling this function because this function is getting called from, is being called here. If you see here. Where am I calling this function? Yeah. So here, after having prepared the data, I am calling the get selection function. You see here, the name of this is get selection. So I'll call this function, and to be able to, so whatever it returns, that will get stored to selected items. And what is this function returning? It is returning the selected items data frame here. So I am passing it the df data frame, and is returning to, and the limit, and it is returning to me the selected items. Then I put those selected items back into my data frame, and I get to see what all things have been selected. So having run those cells in which I have defined, now I am calling the item selector. So let's see, this result is not there. So I am calling the item selector with these 4 lists: item, weight, value, numbers, and this one is, the 5th one is my limit. So limit I am putting as 20 kgs, since all the weights are given in kgs. Now if you see the last one, I am not giving. So since I am not giving, it will take the default value, and if the default value is true, it means that it will do the maximization function. So if it is true, it will come and perform this part of the code, and the else will be left out. If this is false, then it will not perform this part of the code. It will perform the part of the code which is there in the else part of the if-else statement. Okay. So first we will use the maximize here. So either I can give here as maximize is equal to true, or I can just leave it out. So if I do that, then I get all these numbers. So I have the items listed out here. I get the constraint unit, which was weight. Now, if you see here, now with this abstraction, I can either pass a weight, or I can pass the calories, or I can pass the values. So these are the actual variables, and these are the formal variables. The actual variables will get attached to the formal variables when I call the function. So the item here will get attached to items, and I could give any name here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, doesn't matter. But as we have seen earlier, that we should give the names which we are able to connect with even later. So if I give here A and B, C, D, E, then later on when I come back to this code, it will be a bit difficult for me to find out that, okay, the first one was item, or first one was the value, and therefore we give the name. Now if you see here, I have changed the name of the weight here. I have not given the name weight, I have given constraint unit, because in a different context, the constraint unit will not be weight, it can be calories. So that's why I have given that name. So in the backpack problem, now I have got the results. Items are being shown here. The constraint unit, which in this case is weight, is being shown here. Then the value of that, how many of that I have in the house. Then it shows me the value per unit, which we computed inside the function. Selected items, the number of items selected. And then it is the value, now the weight of the number of items that we selected. So here we selected 5, the weight was half kg, so total weight of that particular items becomes 2.5 kg and the value. And then we just take the sum of all of these items. So it shows me here that I am now carrying 19.85. I have got 19.85 kgs of weight, and the value of that is 20,43,000. This part we had done even earlier. The difference is that now I have put that into a function, and the beauty of that is that now I can solve another kind of problem with the same function. And that's the beauty of the function and the classes. So now we are taking up the problem that let's build a lunch and dinner menu builder. So we will try to build a lunch or dinner menu using the same function. And the problem is that there is a person or somebody could say and that, I don't want to have more than 1,000 calories in my menu. Somebody else could come to the same restaurant and say that, I go to gym every morning and I have been asked to increase my calories to say 2,000 or 3,000 calories. I am in the bodybuilding mode. Somebody else could be dieting and he would say that I want to limit my calories to only 1,000. And all these things I should be able to solve. And the purpose is that I want to get these calories at the minimum cost. So this becomes a minimization problem. The previous one was the maximization problem. And I want to have variety as well, and therefore there is a limit on the number of same items in the menu. Otherwise, whatever comes the cheapest, whichever gives me the highest number of calories for the least amount, since we are going to the restaurant, it will not have any constraint like the items in the house. Then it will just pick up the cheapest one and say that you don't need to take anything else. So I define the maximum number of items that I want to put in my menu. So if you see here, I am saying that I can take a maximum of 1 burger, but since I love the chicken wings, even if I have 4 plates of chicken wings, it is fine. So these numbers are defined. Now, so all this information which is given to me, again, as a first step, I am putting that into a format which my system or my machine would be able to understand in a much better fashion. So we are putting again this information which is given to me in the form of lists. As I mentioned, that it's not necessary that we create list. We can use the dictionary also or any other kind of data frame, but we'll go ahead with the list. So we'll put the items available in the restaurant into a list called food items. There I give the names of all the items that I have. Another one, I put the corresponding calories that each of these items has. So a burger has a 600 calories, a pizza has 700 calories, and so on. Then I put the price of these items and I put the numbers that the maximum number of items that I want to put into the menu. Now, if you see, this is a very different problem, but I don't need to do any coding at all. Just I call the item selector function as we had called earlier. But the difference is that now I am calling this function with different variables. So earlier I was calling it with items, weights, value, and the numbers. Now I am calling the same function with food items, calories, price, and max numbers. At the same time, I am now defining, earlier the constraint was the weight here. So earlier I was passing 20 because that was the constraint in terms of weight. Now I am passing here 1,000 because that's the constraint unit. So constraint is the calories, so I am passing 1,000. And now I put maximize is equal to false because I want to minimize it. And then if I call it and print it here, so I think I'm modifying this one. So now if you see, first I print the sum. So now you find out here that I have got constraint unit was calories. So I have built a menu
which is giving me 1000 calories for 310 rupees. And also I get the details of that, which ones do I pick up. So I am picking up 2 packets of potato chips, 1 soft drink, and 1 apple pie. That's it. Doesn't really look like a very good menu to eat, but that's what if um, you have a constraint of 1000 units, and if you want to have the cheapest one, that is what you will get. But if the bodybuilder comes in and he says that I want to have 2000 calories, then our selection becomes different. I have 2 packets of potato chips and software, then I have 1 pizza. Not really a very good thing for a bodybuilder, but still, this is how the selection would go. And I will have 1 apple pie. And the cost for him will be 590 rupees, and he is able to get 2000 calories. Okay. Any questions or any clarifications that any of you want to seek at this point in time? But have you understood that how using the same function we are able to solve the 2 types of problems? Great. Now let me put a twist to the same problem, and I can say that in the previous one I was trying to minimize the cost, and I had a limit on the calories. Now if I put a limit on the price and maximize the calories, which means is that I come to a restaurant and say that I want to, my budget is say 200 rupees or 500 rupees. Now build me a menu which will give me the maximum amount of calories. Can we use the same function for solving that? Just think about it. What we did here was we built a menu where I was putting the constraint as that my constraint or the upper limit for the calories I want to take is defined. And I want to have that many calories at the minimum price. Now I am reversing this and saying that I have a limit on my budget, that I want to spend only say 500 rupees, or that's my budget. For that 500 rupees, build me a menu which gives me the highest amount of calories. Without making any change, how can we achieve that? So here, if you see, it becomes again a maximization problem. So I am trying to maximize what? I am trying to maximize the calories. And what is my constraint? My constraint is the budget, or my constraint is the price. So the total price of the menu should not exceed say 200 rupees or 500 rupees. So if you see, it becomes a maximization problem. But the constraint unit is not calories. The constraint unit becomes the price. So the question is that if it is a healthy diet we need, then can we keep constraint like to select only these items with calorie count and price? Yeah, so by putting different types of constraint, as you can see that either in the same construct or by doing a small tweak, we should be able to identify and know that which item will be the most healthy item. So here, since we are putting only the calories, and once we say that healthy menu, I mean, obviously none of these except for maybe the salad is actually a very healthy salad, or chicken wings is a very healthy thing to keep. So we could actually put the constraint that you must pick one item from this given set of items. So all these constraints can be really built in. But first, let me try to demonstrate to you that if I reverse the problem from saying that
there is a constraint on the calories I can take, and therefore construct a menu for me which is at the lowest cost. If I reverse the problem and say that I have the constraint actually on the amount that I want to spend on a meal, and for that meal I want to get the highest number of calories, what do we do? So that could be just by changing the constraint, but yeah. So if you just reverse the parameters, that's great. Good response from Subbarao. Let's see that what we do here. So earlier, if you see, I called with calories in this sequence: food items, calories, price, max numbers. Now I just reverse it: food items. Then I constraint unit, I make the price, because the second space, if you go to the function definition, the second place is for the constraint unit. So I put the constraint unit now as the price, and in place of values I give the calories, and I make it a maximization problem. So earlier it was maximize was false, I put will maximize is equal to true. And then if I call the function without making any change, we are able to achieve that. So now it is showing me that I am getting 1800 calories for 440 rupees, because I put my budget as 500. So there is no other items which can be accommodated. So for 440 itself, it is giving me 1800 calories. So if somebody has a budget of 300, I don't need to write the code again or do any computation again. I just call this function, and it gives me 1100 calories for 240 rupees. And what does it give? Since you are trying to maximize your calories, it is giving you a very unhealthy diet, just the potato chips and soft drinks. And if I have more money to spend, since I am trying to maximize the calories, don't expect a very healthy. So it says that you take a pizza, you take a soft drink, you take 2 pieces of soft drink, 2 cups of soft drink, 2 pieces of potato chips, and 1 pizza. So you can see that how without making a change, now we have solved 3 kinds of problems. Now if you see, if this kind of thing is put into a restaurant, people may really like to use it. So you go to a counter and there is a small menu builder. You define the price, you define the calories, and not just the calories. At Prashant, as Hemant was asking the question, that can we really convert into a healthy diet? So by selecting certain other parameters, by defining certain other groups, or by giving some more information to the algorithm, we can also give them different options. That you give me an indulgence diet, or you give me a health diet, or you give me the most healthy diet for the least price, and all these variations can be given with a very small piece of code in a menu. So the basic idea today was to show to you that how we can use the power of functions, how we can encapsulate our logic into a function, and once we do it in a smart way, then several different types of problems we can solve with the same piece of code. So now we have got a fair understanding of the basics of the Python code, how to work with pandas. I mean, there is a lot many more things to learn, and as I was mentioning earlier, that I don't want to burden all of you with a long list of commands that you need to learn. And that's why my approach is to take a real life problem and gradually introduce these concepts into the problem. So as you see that now we are able to use the conditional functions like if and else and elif. Now we are able to use the loops. Now we are able to construct a function. And with this, we are now ready to take up the next part in the data science process, which is actually the data cleansing, data munging, data wrangling. So data munging, we call it that if we have to, the data that you will receive in real life will not always be in the form that you want to use. There will be some data which will be missing, some data will not be in the proper format. So preparation of the data into a format in which my code or my machine learning algorithms will be able to consume, preparation of data, cleansing of data, which is done to ensure that the data which I have received from multiple sources, which may not be perfect in the first go, that part is called data munging. And then data wrangling is that since we'll receive data from multiple sources, combining them and seeing the relationships, combining them, that part is called data wrangling. So in one of the movies also, I was seeing, I think it was some ape movie. These King Kong movies are there. No? So in that one, somebody introduces the data scientist that now here is the guy, he is my data wrangler. And that's how the data wrangling word became very popular. So next question is that please get to main function body. I didn't get the question, Rishabh. Can you speak out? So this is this the part that you are asking me to explain, Rishabh? If you can confirm. Rishabh, you have posted a question. I'm not fully able to understand that. What is the question? So if you can either come on a speaker and explain to me. So I am assuming that you're asking for a clarification of this part. So here, what we are doing is that if it is maximized, then whatever is the constraint. So the first thing that we are doing here is that we are saying that in which order should I pick up. So we are finding out the value per unit, and that we achieve by dividing the value by the constraint unit. So in this case, in the case of the backpack problem, it was finding out for me what is the value of a given item per kg. So that's what we were getting here. So if you see the value per unit, we are finding out the value per kg. So here for 100 grams, the value was 25,000. So value per kg is 2.5 lakhs. Similarly, I found out the value per kg for all the items. And then since this is the giving me the best value per unit of weight, I will pick up this one as the first item. So we need to find out which one is giving me the highest value, and then we are giving the then we are doing the selection. So if it is a maximization function, then we sort it based on the value per unit. If it is a maximization, if it is a minimization function, since we want to minimize that value, we will take the reverse of it, and that's why I am taking 1 by this. So I hope it is clear. So the point I was trying to make is that now we are ready to a large extent to take up some larger, data set and try to do some data science functions like data munging and data wrangling. So today we will just give you a glimpse of the kind of thing that we are going to work with. So now with this background, we are attempting to solve a bit larger problem. So I am reading a file which is a housing data set, and now from this URL I am reading the file, and I want to see what this file contains. So I just give the head. So
it gives me the first file record. So if this file contains the data on some different parameters of a house, longitude, latitude, this data set is, so by giving a head, you are able to get a
feel of what this data contains. But what I want to end with today is we'll put a describe function. So that gives me what this data contains. So if you see, the number of records is 20,640. So now we will start handling a larger set of data. So now in this data set, if you see, it is giving you the count of values in each of these columns. One thing you will notice here is that in the total bedrooms, I don't have the same number of columns. It means that there are certain records which are null. So these are the problems that we will always have, and these are the problems we'll learn how to solve starting tomorrow. That is, if I have got a data set where for all the records, I have got the values but for total bedrooms, I don't have value for certain number of records. What do I do with that? Similarly, we'll find that the max values are actually in some cases completely out of line. So at 75 percentile, the total rooms was say 3,000. The max number of rooms is 39,000. So maybe there is some outliers, there is some strange kind of data in my data set. So how do we get a feel of it? How do we handle some of these problems? The problems of the outliers, the problems of the missing data, and the problems that I have in the data set, certain values which are numeric, certain values. If you see the last one, ocean proximity, this is a categorical data, or this is a data in the string. So how do I convert that into a form which my machine would be able to understand? Because all the operations we can't really do with these strings. So how do we convert that into a numeric so that it becomes easier for the machine to operate? So these are the part of the, now we are entering into a process which is in almost all the cases, the first and the most important step, and also the most time consuming step in the entire data science life cycle, which is data cleansing. So I have got the data, but that data would not always be in an appropriate format. How do we clean the data? How do we, and there are different ways of doing it. So those steps we will start learning starting tomorrow.
Any questions from today's session? If there are no questions, then can we end the session today, and tomorrow we'll start working on the data cleansing part using the housing data. Yeah, so the recorded sessions I will upload
today, and I'll give you the access. I have all those files. Definitely you will get the access today. Okay, then we'll end the session now, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.